este día. A Nicolás Viterbo también, que colaboró mucho en la organización de esto, y a Sergio Rillonier, que es parte del gobierno de la facultad, que nos ayudó con el aula y todo el equipamiento para poder trabajar hoy. En el año 2022, pasando por la avenida Dorrego, frente al hipódromo, me interesé por una obra que se desarrollaba en un edificio que hasta ese momento eran unos estacionamientos, que hoy es el Paseo Vigero. Más allá del proyecto, que propone un paseo urbano verde e integra nuevos programas, me pareció, y me parece todavía hoy, una iniciativa destacable la reconversión arquitectónica y urbana de estructuras existentes, que en muchos casos además son obsoletas. No solo porque recuperar, resignificar es innovador en una cultura del descarte, sino porque plantea algunas ideas interesantes sobre el significado de la complejidad actual de la arquitectura, sobre los usos y la reactivación urbana, y particularmente sobre la acción de los arquitectos y urbanistas frente al problema medioambiental. No conocía a Era, lo conocí recién hoy personalmente, es decir que simplemente lo conocí a través de su trabajo, de sus conferencias y de sus publicaciones. Investigando sobre su trabajo y sus proyectos en escala urbana, fundamentalmente sus conferencias en el Washington Economic Partners y en The Restorative City, diseñando New York con la salud como el centro, y por su ponencia en la 18ª Bienal de Buenos Aires. Quisiera decir unas pocas palabras también sobre su obra, porque en su obra y en sus proyectos se pueden encontrar ciertas constantes que se manifiestan a lo largo del tiempo. La primera de ellas es la preocupación manifiesta por la dimensión urbana de la arquitectura, definida por el propio Era como la experiencia física y mental del individuo, ese espacio entre, ese espacio híbrido y ese espacio límite. La segunda constante que se manifiesta es la preocupación por los espacios abiertos, por los espacios públicos y comunitarios, donde se desarrolla la experiencia de la interacción humana, la calle, la plaza, el parque. También la preocupación por activar las actividades de la calle. Y en cuarto lugar, una preocupación manifiesta por la construcción de una experiencia de la ciudad, como un espacio urbano, traspasando la idea de la ciudad de la concentración de programas o servicios. En sus obras y proyectos se producen operaciones de overlapping, o sea, de superposición, como los megamurales del proyecto de Vicente, en Brooklyn, donde se entretejen la comunidad, el arte y la vida urbana, o en el caso del Paseo Quijena en Buenos Aires, donde conviven la preexistencia, el paseo, el parque y el trabajo, o en la escala urbana, en el Golden Triangle de Washington, donde mediante operaciones denominadas por el propio Era como quirúrgicas, interactúan y reconfiguran un sector de la ciudad, nuevos programas, nuevas formas urbanas, infraestructuras reconvertidas y nuevos espacios urbanos como callejones y centros de manzana interconectados. Por último, y dado que estamos en un ámbito académico, quiero hacer énfasis en la gran importancia que damos al trabajo profesional como fuente de reflexión y a la búsqueda de recuperar la complejidad y lo transdisciplinar de la construcción de la arquitectura y la ciudad, bajo la idea de que la arquitectura debería dejar de transcurrir en el camino de la superficialidad y de la imagen como única fuente de creatividad. En síntesis, quiero destacar la importancia de un trabajo, el de Era y la oficina UBA, que plantea una reflexión profunda y creativa sobre la calidad de vida en la ciudad, sobre la dimensión comunitaria del espacio público urbano y sobre nuestra responsabilidad con respecto al medio ambiente. Nada más, lo dejo con esto.
So much. Thank you all for having me here today. No, it's okay. It's okay. Can you hear me okay? It's great to be back in Argentina. It's great to be back in Buenos Aires. It's not a secret that I love this city. And what's not to love, right? Amazing weather, amazing food, mostly amazing culture and people. But as an architect, I also love this city because it's a very rare city by which the formal expression and the ordinary rawness and life and human scale are overlapped in quite a magnificent way. When I mean human scale, I mean that the neighborhoods, although different in different districts, feels like they serve the public. The public realm, or the public space, seems like it's served by the building that surrounds it, to create a sense of familiarity, a sense of belonging. The scale of the street feels like the buildings and the life inside is expanded to the outside and vice versa, constantly, blurring the line between public and private. There's a movie I watched on the flight here, Argentina 1984. I'm sure you've seen it, about this great trial. It depicts, I think, Buenos Aires in such a beautiful, beautiful way. It celebrates its civic buildings, the glory of their avenues, the big open parks, but then the very direct human relationship. And there's a piece in the movie where they announce on TV that the trial is going to happen. It's at night. And the guy walks out to the balcony, and you see this vision of all of the neighbors watching their TV. Some of them are sitting in their balcony outside, looking at each other. That tension between the buildings, the outside-indoor connection, is very unique for the city. And with all of its challenges, socially, economically, politically, it seems like the architecture serves the public well. You can have a small apartment or a large apartment. The city is yours. And if you think that's common, it's not. And part of the challenge of modern cities today, mostly after the Industrial Revolution, is that the increase in density have distorted some of the most fundamental connection between people and their communities, between them to one another. Add to that the cars have taken over our cities, in large scale, and in a post-COVID era, there is an impact, dramatic impact on typical retail experience. People can buy things online. You don't have to go out to do anything. You can do everything from everywhere. Plus, a lot of cities have seen deployment of working force. People are not going to work in the office. And cities that have commercial centers that are dedicated for office, and downtown Buenos Aires is somewhat similar, have been seeing a ghost town. Now I think with all those compliments, some French architects and landscape designers in the 1800s have created an amazing master plan with an intention of bringing Paris to Buenos Aires. You've got Paris without the French people. That's a win-win. kidding, I love the French. There's a lot of new typologies that I recognize in the city, new residential towers that are very self-serving. You see towers surrounded by fences everywhere. Hundreds of meters, you go around the block and there's no street engagement at all. There are areas like, and I'm an outsider so I can say I don't care. Porto Madero, new neighborhoods, very expensive, beautiful building. But you can walk around the entire building, including this beautiful courtyard, and there's no accessibility. The building is self-serving. It's closing itself to the city. And we, I think, collectively have to be aware of that if we want to maintain the beauty character of the site. So, what I'd like to do today is to share with you some of our recent projects around the world in an effort to express the belief that we have that porosity, the blurring of the lines between public and private, the building as a contribution structure to the public realm, in fact, is something that all of the cities around the world are actually looking for. And perhaps it's also a way to solve many of the modern difficulties and challenges of cities like such in post-COVID era. Comprendo? Yeah, this translation?
Yes, sure.
So, I'm not going to talk a lot about us, but ODA is now operating around the globe. We're invited to look at buildings at different scales. And I think they're very diverse, both in program and in scale and geography. But what unites them all is the urge or the intention for porosity. The intention to break the buildings, both its facades as well as the way that it operates and the way that it engages with the street and the neighborhood to create a sense of porosity. And I want to start in DC, the capital of the United States. Washington, DC has a major issue. Right by the main wall, which you all recognize, north of it, north of the White House, there's two neighborhoods, one called downtown, the other one is Golden Triangle. And both of them are predominantly office neighborhoods. Post-COVID, very few people come to work. Around 10 to 15% of where it used to be. And that area, which is the heart of the city, the heart of our country, has become a ghost town. In fact, if you look at this, about 70% of the buildings are office buildings. Only about 40% are Class A, meaning there are new. Most of them are old buildings. The retail at the ground floor is, the cultural institutions are very minor, and the retail was serving the commuter town people. Banks and services for businesses, they're very deep and they're not functioning as well. And so, when you look at these two, before COVID, there are thousands of people commuting every day to work at this area. And they gave the bloodline, the life for the entire heart of the city. A lot of them, by the way, work for the government. But now there's only about 10-15% of that. What we want is we want to bring back the heart of Washington, D.C. to become the beating heart of the entire city. And how do you do this? How do you bring people back to the streets of downtown? And so the mayor reached out to us to think of a study. And if you look at the buildings that created gained value from the public realm that came, from the office commuters, now the building lost their value as well. We came up with a plan called DC Greenways. And it's a provocation, it's an idea in large scale. If you zoom in and look at the Golden Triangle, right by the White House, you see that the blocks of the buildings are very large and the streets are just not enough as a public space that creates any attraction at all. But at the same time, every block has a lot of what we call alleyways, service alleyways, that are underutilized. What if we take the big buildings at every one of these blocks and we allow the private sector, the developers, to cut them at the alleyway side, inside, and move the floor area to the top? You don't lose value, you actually gain value, but also you create a park at the center of every block, or a courtyard. That courtyard could also be supported by ground floor public spaces instead of dying retail. And of course, the ability to move the floor area to the top gives value that allow developers to do that. Otherwise, there's no financial sense. Those would become a sequence of green courtyards that are united and connected between the streets and create a type of public space unlike anything else in DC. And now maybe the ground floor should be more mixed use. We'll bring public spaces like universities, campuses, art, museums to capture the ground floor. They would then create retail that is very unique. Residential buildings are going to be converted, and a mixed-use ground floor will be created around that public space. So we were hired a few years ago to design a large residential building in the heart of Brooklyn, in a place where the scale is very small. It was a challenge. How do you bring a massive building into a neighborhood that is not fragmented? And we thought, what if we take the New York City block, which is those kind of donut-shaped buildings, and we overlapped it with the idea of an old European city? Maybe we can get a combination. We then proposed the city to demap the streets that unite these two blocks and make it a public park. And then that public park is connected and linked to a sequence of 5 courtyards, pedestrian courtyards. Now those courtyards are interconnected through the ground floor, but they also bleed and connected to the park in the center. So all of a sudden they become a whole resource for the neighborhood around, which doesn't have green spaces. They are designed not only architecturally, but also from a program point of view, to allow for a mix and diverse usages at the ground floor, from amenities to coffee shop and breweries and galleries. And at the end, it's a sequence of those courtyards that makes the neighborhood alive again and contributes to the livelihood of the entire neighborhood around it. We also reached out to local artists, you can go next, and created 14 mega murals in and around the buildings. The murals are placed in a double-loaded corridor, so we break the darkness of the linear corridor and expose the art from the inside out and create a celebration of art and community. And most of those were done in collaborations with groups of kids, and it was a beautiful, beautiful project for us to communicate with the community and collaborate in creating those kind of urban museum, if you will. All of the ground floor is now open to light on both sides. There's courtyards on every one of those programs. So you can not only have connection to the outside, but you can now migrate from one place to another while watching and seeing the transparency of what's going on in each one. Combination of landscape of the roof, there's a 6,000 square meter of park, communal park on the roof. There's another 5,000 square meter of park at the public ground floor with the art, with the community, with the views of New York. And granted this project and echoed across national lines. People really appreciate that typology, which is not very typical for New York City. I want to give you another example, which is not a residential building. This building is in Baltimore. And through this building, I want to express the vision for maybe potentially modern contemporary architecture, where the slogan "Form follows function" was what we've all followed for many years and what defined the modernist movement. And what do you do today when function is very clear? What do you do today when you can do anything from anywhere? You can work from home, you can play, you can exhibit. What do we do when technology allows us to be very flexible with our buildings? What defines the rules of the game for us as architects? What gives the form? And in some way, we started thinking that perhaps what gives the form for our building is not the function, but the experience. If we can define what types of experiences could occur in a particular building, we can then give it a shape. The harbor in Baltimore is a very interesting, beautiful kind of waterway in the east coast, and the downtown was surrounded by the harbor. For many years it was neglected. Developers have bought and sold it, and it became sort of a rundown area. We've been asked to design a corner building right next to a park with a very big program. The developer could build 5 stories of commercial program. They didn't know what to do with it, but they were very concerned that 5 stories of commercial program doesn't yield any value. We started shaping the building based on its context. So if you look at that box, it's going to keep on going. Thank you. We wanted to keep the corridor views from the street to the waterfront. We then wanted to bring natural light into the heart of the building so you can get porosity of light. Cantilever the building over the park to create this indoor-outdoor tension. And then treated the corners where you have the best views as the gateway to the building. Now we cut the building in the middle to make it as a gateway from the city to the harbor, and then lifted up each one of these bays to create a covered, shaded plaza that extends the park. To create a unique space in Baltimore doesn't exist. There's no shaded area in Baltimore right now. Then we connected the second floor from the harbor to the corner of the city by an elevated market. This will be open to the elements but covered, and could be any type of market, from food market, vegetable market, Christmas market. It would allow the public to see the waterfront from an elevated point of view, and also an amazing roof deck that will be open to the public for events, for gathering, for concerts, etc. So the entire ground floor was shaped to create an experience for the general public that perhaps would be attractive to come here regardless of what the program about will be. The rest of the building was wrapped around as a container. That container could be very flexible. It could be art, display, it could be a museum, it could be a market, it could be retail, food and beverage, restaurants, but they're all united by the central core and the openings at the ground floor that are open to the public and allow people to come through the building and create a very unique addition to the city. The obelisk at the center is another element that not just bring light, but also allow people to congregate. As a stadium, they're very big in sports. It's not soccer, it's baseball in Baltimore. And so a place where they can celebrate means of the game, they can have public presentations, and of course the flexible floors have natural light that would attract people to go up and down the building from events and concerts to otherwise other things. So, essentially, here's a building that was given to us as architects with our program and ended up as what we feel is a porous expression of the needs of our community today, while becoming a certain icon that the city could be proud of. The developers, the private sector who are actually building the building and needs to be able to build the right building for us. Then of course the users of the building itself. And what we try to do is what we call a win-win-win, a triangle of success. The public would win from that building because it would create unpredictable gathering spaces unlike anything else in the city that is freedom. The users of the building would enjoy being in a place that is so exciting and accessible in a great location. And the builders, the private developers who are building it, will get a building that is much more desirable and perhaps more successful economically than anything else. And if it's not the case, they would not build it. So we as architects have to be smart about the way we guide our clients to create buildings that are good for them, but they're good for everybody else. Which leads me into Buenos Aires. And I want to talk about Paseo again. I'm sure you've kind of drove around the building, or you've heard about this. But it's a building that I'm very humble and hopeful, very proud of, and I think we all are, because it does exactly what I described before. It tries to make the three aspects of our community successful, win-win-win. It tries to create a... So, here's the existing structure. We propose to remove the cladding and I think that the tower that was existing, take pieces that would allow natural light to the heart of the footprint, and then use the new FAR as additional floor area at the top to define a ramp, a continuous ramp that cuts through the entire building. That ramp while being totally open and totally public to everyone, would not interfere with the privacy and the quality of the working area, of the offices, would infuse more lively retail and food and beverage, and would create a very unique park. Maybe for the first time in Buenos Aires, an open public park on a roof. We use indigenous planting and hopefully seasonal planting that will kind of celebrate the diversity and richness of biodiversity that exists in the area, and will just contribute an amazing opportunity to watch the rock band singing at the racetrack without paying a ticket. Now, of course, there was a very long dialogue between us and the client. Are we going to open this thing to the public 24/7? Okay, you can close it at night for safety, but yes, this would be an extension of a public park that would be open to everyone at any given time. And you know why we're going to do this? Because that's what's going to give value to your building. Because in a place that maybe nobody wants to rent an office, or it's hard for any retail, this will become a center of action and attraction and activity for tourists, people in the city, and that would create value, elevate the building. So velocity will bring prosperity. Well, this was the rendering that we created for it, and the next one is a picture that was taken probably about a month ago. The project is well underway. I want to say we try to use materials that are locally sourced and that we know can be locally done by the local workers. Concrete, the glass system is local, and then the rest is very simple. We're going to use wood, the same way that this building is using wood, and extend the tradition of Argentina with this type of architecture, but add an organic form to it that unites the public as part of the experience. I want to talk about our second project in Buenos Aires called Zeta. And Zeta is a small residential building, and it's right between Palermo and Buenos, two amazing neighborhoods of tradition. And we could go a little quicker. I would just say, we can cut to the building itself. That, you know the neighborhood, it has a rich history, it's beautiful, but it was an opportunity for us to investigate the history evolution of a balcony. You know, Buenos Aires is a city of balconies. You had different typology of balconies throughout the different styles and history of time, which lended somehow in the most modernistic linear balcony that stuck with you guys, and you can't get out of it, I don't know why. Every new building has a linear balcony. Now, nothing against linear balconies. They're not very functional. They're not a room within your apartment. But obviously, they provide this indoor-outdoor. And we wanted to respect that, respect the tradition of balconies and the history of Buenos Aires and Palermo, but bring a modern take or a love story to the balconies of Buenos Aires by creating a building that is all about balconies. The facade is balconies. But the balconies are not just linear, they're rooms, exterior rooms, all of them are kind of rectangle, square, all of them can accommodate sitting areas and arrangement, another room for the building to sit outside. And the composition of all of them, the relationship between the balcony and the building creates the right ferocity, the polarity between the public and private, in a way that the sphere around the building and the connection between the neighbor will become the vertical neighborhood for the tenants of this building. This building is also under construction. We went there yesterday, try to control the concrete work so it's accurate and beautiful and clean, which you can imagine not an easy test. But hopefully in a few months you'll be able to see the superstructure done. residential building, we talked about the balcony, we talked about the love story of the balcony. We were called in the north of Taipei to design a residential building in a very interesting location. It's kind of at the northern edge of the city, but the site was very challenging. It was very long, and it required to create a long building, like an endless long building, something that reminded me of the sort of the Soviet typologies, because that was the zoning. There was nowhere else to go, and they were looking to create an attractive residential building. We did our research, and of course we all know the tradition of Taiwanese community buildings. And if you don't, it's quite amazing. It's a sequence of courtyards that unites different typologies, different types of activities that serve this entire community. There are homes, there's retail, there's a market, there's a school, kindergarten. And the community at large share those courtyards as part of their livelihood. It reminds me a little bit of the inspiration of Bushwick, the project of Bushwick. We thought, how can we translate that tradition to a vertical wall building? Well, when we looked at the site, we took that typology exactly and planted it on our site, and we said, what would happen if we tilted 90 degrees? And we would take that series of courtyards building and build a wall with all of these vertical openings. Well, can these openings now still become the common space for all the people who live in the building? Can you buy or rent an apartment at the bottom, but still experience each one of those gardens in different heights, different orientation, and that will become part of your domain. And as we added the balconies, of course, to that composition, we landed with a building that essentially is a wall with mega openings in it. The openings frame the sky, the openings frame the street, the openings create a porous relationship. And the gaps become the places of interactions for the people who live there. We also designed each one of those slightly different to accommodate for different uses. There's a tea house for an evening shop, places you can have a glass of wine, a small garden for kids to play in. And that type of porosity can express the old ideas of Taiwan into a very modern structure. And again, the architecture, iconic nature, is served by the experiences that the building provides. There's a duality between the two. Architecture tries to express the experiences that it provides. I want to end with some tall towers. And a lot of people have challenged us, said, okay, this is all nice and good, but what happens when you start to go vertically? All these big towers, of course they're detached from the street. Of course they're limited in their ability to contribute to the public realm. You can't do balconies everywhere at 1,000 feet in the air. And that's an interesting challenge for us to think about. I want to show you a few examples of how we try to do it. The first one is a building we just won in a competition in Seoul, in Korea. And a very interesting story because this is one of the best locations in Seoul. And there's two neighborhoods that are quite historical and very vibrant, but they're cut by a main street, main avenue that really disconnected too. There's also an elevated park that very few people know about. And the city have decided that in order to infuse more life to the public spaces, they need to give an assignment to the private developers. And they said, we're going to pick 5 projects that give a significant contribution to the city, to the public realm, to their footprint. And for that, we're going to give extra floor area, extra height, as a developer, you're going to win big. And we were invited to participate. Very similar structure to Buenos Aires. And what we realized was that the building could be a gateway and a connection between the two neighborhoods on both sides. In fact, there's different in heights between the upper floors and the lower floors, and if the building can negotiate the different in height and attract people to go up through the building, perhaps there's a journey that starts to unite the park and the two neighborhoods together as a walkable journey. And the base of the building was supposed to be a glass box of retail. and then what we call a podium, and a tower on a podium. What we propose the developer to do is penetrate the podium and take out the program and create a shaded park that allows people to go from the street level all the way to the upper level through a series of experiences, while the courtyard has retail, the upper part has galleries and amenities, a coffee shop. And that garden essentially becomes a totally public space on a private land that unites the linear experience of the street with something that is a new type of public space. And it creates a gateway, it invites people to come in. This is an invitation. Please cross the street. Please come up. There might be an experience to enjoy. And then this urban connection was not possible without private intervention on a private land. Now, of course, we were thinking, what's the right expression or articulation for the tower itself? And we thought that we're going to do the same thing. We're going to create a regression. We're going to cut out of the tower itself at any level and create an amenity place for the tenants of the building. A park in the sky that would be a hole in the building, would express the architecture, iconic nature by the void that it creates, would echo the same language that the ground floor echoes, and will become an amazing gathering space for the people who buy the rental apartments. It's going to be partially hotel, partially resident. You can go to the video. To understand, things like that cost money. Our cities cannot afford to continue to do this. They don't have the area, they don't have the money, the resources. This is a way to divert the public, the private sector's money to create better cities by creating iconic buildings that expresses the benefits of the win-win of three components. Since we are short in time, I've got 5 more minutes, I want to finish with a very different typology of the tower. And going back and ending in New York City. This is our city. This is, we're going to jump. So I'm going to skip this project. I'll just say very quickly, this is a building we designed site construction in Rotterdam in the Netherlands. And it's an historical building. It's actually a monumental old post office building. The city didn't know what to do with it. It was empty for 12 years. They couldn't afford to do another museum, and they thought, what else can we do? Can there be a private-public partnership to create something unique here? And it was an international invited competition. We won the competition based on one big idea. And the idea was that we're going to create a passageway through the building, uniting the old historical post office room with a newly created courtyard that is done under the tower, connect the two together, and basically unite two sides of the streets that wants to be united urbanistically. On the right side is OMA, Rodisland building, the Museum of Rotterdam, and then on the left side, the main avenue. You take a small street, hidden street, connected to the main avenue, through the building by creating 2 enclosed public courtyards that become an asset for the city itself. And of course, mixed-use program with the hotel, residential, living spaces, F&B, restaurant, retail, all coming together as a beehive for urban activity. thank you very much for listening.
Quería saber si hay alguien que quisiera hacer alguna pregunta o algún comentario para establecer lo que deberíamos ver. Este es el momento. Bueno, yo por mi parte, yo sí quería hacer una pregunta, porque quería saber qué tipo de vínculo conceptual tiene tu proyectos vinculados a la ciudad con el New Urban que se desarrolló en Estados Unidos. Y si tiene alguna relación con... El otro día estuve viendo una conferencia de Jeff Speck vinculada a la idea de caminar por la ciudad. Me parece que tiene mucho que ver con lo que contaste del proyecto de Washington.
Thank you for the question. I hope I understand it. I think our cities are shaped in different eras based on different philosophies, and it's a very hard and slow thing to adopt and adjust. But it's our responsibility to be proactive as architects and work without excuses in the realm that we operate in to try to push theory in reality. And there's always people ask you about compromise. When you're prolific, when you work for developers and clients and you must deliver, you compromise a lot the theory behind what you do, and that's a challenge for every architect at any given time throughout history. So we have to accept it and embrace it. And I think that there's a major change that I can feel in the urban experience of modern cities as it has a hard time adapting to the needs of contemporary communities. I think technology adds a lot to it. The simple measure by which when I grew up, I lived in a 5-story building in a relatively poor neighborhood, but our life was in the courtyard, in the streets, as a kid. And I remember I tell a story where my mother would come home around 4 o'clock. She would make dinner. We would play soccer down below. And then she would go out to the balcony and whistle. We had a whistle. And she would whistle so I would come home. But the amazing part is that between 5 to 6 o'clock every day, all the moms in the neighborhood whistled to their kids, and each one had a different whistle. So I remember the symphony whistle as an announcement that the day's over and we all need to come home. And the urbanism for me as a child was the explicit intimacy between these public realm, the street, the courtyard, and my mother at the balcony, and how that experience, we have lost that in many ways, in many ways. And For me, the biggest question in architecture today, beyond, of course, sustainability and other aspects that everybody talks about, is how do we bring back humanity in light of high density? Because we all know that high density city is the only solution for long-haul sustainability, that most people need to live in cities, and the numbers are growing. And so we have to figure this out. How do we build vertically? How do we increase density while maintaining humanity in our cities? And that's a very tough question. And what Paseo Videla tries to do is give a suggestion, give an idea, even though it's not a high-rise building, how we can not only reuse our old structures and adapt them to the needs of today, but also how we can potentially create buildings that are more generous. And they provide the type of intimacy that perhaps we cannot get in the streets today. And hopefully that type of thinking is something that could echo and continue, and in fact, neo-urbanism in the future. And I hope that we're going to see more buildings that are more porous, less fenced. We'll see more in and out experiences that are more ambiguity, less, this is a residential neighborhood, this is a commercial neighborhood, this is a museum, this is an opera house. More, here's a place of experience. You can watch opera, watch an art show, and then have dinner afterwards. Because that's the kind of experiences that we're looking for today. I hope I answered that question. Take 2 more questions. You shy in Buenos Aires? That's not how I experience the city. Come on. Any question? Oh.
Easier to decide for a local urbanism or maybe for international? Because urbanism is big and urbanism is big. When you decide for another place, maybe we switch model from another perspective. So I ask you as a person, it's easier to decide for a local place or international?
Yeah, I mean, is it easier to design for a local place when you are, I guess, where you live? Because you have more familiarity with the culture and the city? Or is it easier to design internationally in places you don't know? And it's a very, very interesting question. I never thought of it as easier or harder. Clearly, when you go to a new place, you have to educate yourself. You have to spend time, you have to understand the people, you have to understand the architecture, but you're a stranger no matter what. But sometimes being a stranger has an advantage. Because I don't know why, it's not logical, maybe people have a tendency to listen more when you come from a different place. It's unfortunate. It's harder for me to convince my clients in New York City to do certain things than it is for me to convince clients in Taiwan and Taipei or Buenos Aires. Partially because people are receptive to new ideas when they come from the outside. And that's an unfortunate. To explain why we deserve to do what we deserve to do, why there should be a tower on top of a historical building, why? And it was a very interesting educational process by which I almost flew every 2 weeks and met with people, created friends, and met with the communities to understand what's the psyche behind the people of the Netherlands, and especially Rotterdam, to understand what happened in World War II, and the city was wiped out to the ground, and the forces that brought new architecture in, and then articulate an idea that is a foreign idea. Make a public space through a building that used to be a public space. Imagine the National Library have a park in the middle of it that is open to everyone here in Buenos Aires. In a way, the new library is quite amazing, that it creates that journey, through the building. So, I guess the answer is I don't know, but I think it's necessary for both locally and internationally. Okay, I want to thank you everyone for your time, and it's great